The great lecture hall of the Galactic Academy echoed with laughter. Hundreds of alien cadets sat in tiered seats, their strange voices blending into a mocking chorus. On the central stage, the instructor's voice tried to remain calm as he read from the glowing script in his hands. "Human myths," he announced, as though the words themselves were a joke. "Tales of giants, dragons, gods of war, and impossible battles." The cadets howled with amusement. To them, humanity was not a noble species, not even a tragic one. Humanity was a punchline. They were gone, extinct, erased from history thousands of years ago. Their ruins lay buried on a blue world that had burned itself long before the Council rose to power. All that remained of them were fragmented writings, carvings, and old songs, collected by scholars who thought them curiosities, nothing more. But one cadet did not laugh. She leaned forward, her eyes glowing with unease. And when the noise of the hall finally settled, her voice broke the silence. "What if these are not stories?" she asked. The instructor frowned. "What do you mean?" The cadet's voice trembled. "What if they are warnings?" A hush fell over the hall. No one laughed now. The galaxy had always seen humanity as primitive. Their technology was outdated, their fleets small, their tactics brutal but short-sighted. Other species saw them as nothing but another doomed race, loud, violent, burning too fast. And in the end, it seemed the galaxy had been right. Humanity vanished. Some said they destroyed themselves in endless wars. Others whispered they had faced an enemy so terrible it erased them in silence. What was left were scraps of culture, legends carved into stone, passed through archives, locked away in libraries. To most, they were curiosities. To others, they were foolish tales. But in the corners of the galaxy, rumors spread. A whisper in the trade ports. A drunken story in backwater cantinas. A signal too old to be fake. They all told of one thing, a survivor. A single human. Frozen, hidden, lost among the wreckage of forgotten wars. The Council ignored it. The Academy laughed at it. But the whispers grew. The instructor, an old scholar of the Krell species, sighed and tapped his claw against the console. "These writings," he explained, "are symbolic. Humans made up stories to explain things they did not understand. They imagined gods because they feared storms. They wrote of dragons because they feared the dark. And they spoke of titans because they feared war." More laughter rolled across the hall. "They were primitives," another cadet said smugly. "They could not see the truth of the galaxy." But the first cadet, the one who had questioned, shook her head. She was young, barely trained, but her voice carried strength. "Stories survive for reasons," she said. "Legends are told again and again because they hold something true." The instructor narrowed his eyes. "And what truth do you believe, cadet?" The hall waited. "That humanity," she whispered, "faced things we cannot imagine. And their myths are not fairy tales. They are records of what they fought." The silence that followed was heavy. Some cadets shifted in discomfort. Others sneered. But a few, just a few, looked uneasy. That night, as the cadets returned to their dorms, the whisper began again. "You heard her, didn't you?" one muttered. "They say a signal was picked up in the outer rim. Old tech. Human code. Impossible. Is it? What if one of them survived?" The story spread faster than light. By morning, the Academy buzzed with talk. Some called it nonsense. Others were afraid to dismiss it. A single human, alive? It was impossible. And yet, if it were true, what would that human know? What secrets, what weapons, what truths of the legends? The Council dismissed it immediately. In their chambers, they laughed just as the cadets had laughed. Superstition, they called it. Old ghost stories. Nothing more. But in the shadows, the whispers grew louder. One cadet, driven by curiosity, slipped into the forbidden archives of the Academy. Dust coated the air, shelves towering like monuments, filled with records no one cared to read. There, she found it. Not just fairy tales. Not just songs. But battle reports. Carved in human script, translated by forgotten scholars. Records of wars against things with no name. Descriptions of creatures that fed on stars, of enemies that melted reality itself. And the strangest part? The reports did not describe defeat. They described victory. Humanity had faced monsters no alien could imagine, and survived. Until one day, they didn't. Why? The cadet trembled as she copied the words into her datapad. She should have left. She should have buried the truth. But curiosity burned stronger than fear. And so she whispered it to others. And they whispered to more. Until half the academy spoke of it in hushed tones. The council could not allow fear to spread. They made a declaration, broadcast across the galaxy. Human myths are only that. Myths. They are the dreams of a lost species. To believe otherwise is foolish. There are no survivors. There is no truth in their tales. The words echoed through the systems. Some believed. Others laughed. But some remembered the silence that followed after ancient battles. The scars left on planets no one could explain. The ruins older than the council itself. And they wondered. What if the council was not protecting them from lies, but from the truth? The cadet who first spoke out could not sleep. Her dreams were filled with fire, with shadows, with voices that were not hers. She saw titans walking across burning stars. She saw dragons coiled around shattered moons. She saw soldiers, human soldiers, standing against the impossible. And in the middle of it all, she saw a figure. A lone human. Watching. Waiting. When she woke, she could not breathe. The image burned inside her, like a warning carved into her soul. The academy laughed at myths. The council denied the rumors. But the galaxy had already begun to change. Because somewhere in the ruins of forgotten wars, a signal blinked. Old. Weak. But human. And it whispered across the stars. I am still here. In the endless dark of the outer rim, a single light flickered. Not a star. Not a beacon. A signal. It was faint, older than any empire, repeating the same pattern over and over again. At first, the scavenger crew thought it was just broken code from an ancient satellite. But as their ship drifted closer, the signal grew stronger, pulsing like a heartbeat. Inside the wreckage of a shattered warship, a pod waited. And inside the pod, something moved. The galaxy had mocked human legends. They had laughed at myths of warriors and monsters. But when the pod opened, the scavengers learned the truth. Humanity was not gone. One survivor remained. The Iron Fong was not a proud ship. Rust crawled along its hull, its engines coughed more than they roared, and its crew were outcasts, scavengers who lived on scraps. They hunted wrecks along the outer rim, chasing after old tech, broken drones, and forgotten machines. Anything that could be sold. Anything that could keep them alive one more cycle. But this wreck was different. The scanners showed it was older than the council itself. The hull was built from alloys no one recognized. Its engines were twisted, torn apart in some ancient battle. And yet, buried deep inside, the signal still pulsed. Whatever's in there, muttered Jack the captain, isn't worth our skins. But greed burned brighter than fear. And so they went in. The corridors of the dead warship were silent. Shadows stretched across rusted walls. Their lamps caught markings on the metal, symbols none could read, but all felt uneasy seeing. And then, they found it. A chamber sealed by layers of armor. Broken, but not destroyed. Inside it, a pod. Frost coated the glass. Lights blinked weakly on its surface, struggling against the weight of centuries. And behind the glass, a figure lay still. Not alien. Not machine. Human. The crew froze. None had ever seen one before, not alive. They had heard the jokes, the stories, the myths. But this was flesh. It can't be, whispered one. "It is," another muttered. "That's a human." The pod hissed. The frost cracked. And then, the human opened his eyes. For a long moment, the scavengers did not move. They had no idea what to expect. Was he weak? Mad? A ghost of a dead species? The man gasped, choking on stale air. His muscles trembled, but his eyes burned with fire. Eyes that had seen wars none of them could imagine. He staggered forward, falling to his knees. The scavengers pointed their weapons, but none fired. Something about him stopped them. He was no ghost. He was a survivor. They brought him aboard the Iron Fong. He barely spoke at first, his voice hoarse, his words broken. But slowly, the scavengers realized, he understood their language. Not perfectly, but enough. "Where am I?" he asked. "The Outer Rim," the captain answered cautiously. "Who are you?" "Scavengers. Traders. And you?" The human's eyes darkened. "Last survivor." The words sent a chill through the crew. As days passed, the survivor grew stronger. His body healed faster than they expected. His eyes grew sharper. His voice steadier. And then, he began to speak of the past. He told them of wars against creatures that should not exist. Beasts that fed on suns. Machines that consumed entire fleets. Titans that tore apart moons. The scavengers laughed nervously at first. But the way he spoke, his voice low, his eyes burning, it didn't sound like stories. It sounded like memory. "These are your myths," one crew member dared to say. "No," the survivor answered coldly. "They are history. You laugh because you never faced them. My people did. And we survived. Until the end." The words hung heavy. The scavengers began to argue among themselves. "Sell him to the council. They'll pay for a real human." "No. He's dangerous. You saw his eyes. He's hiding something. He could lead us to treasure. He could lead us to death." The captain said nothing. He only watched. Watched how the survivor walked the corridors like he belonged there. Watched how he touched the ship's controls as though they were toys. Watched how even in silence, he carried an aura of command. This was no helpless relic. This was a warrior. While the scavengers argued, the ship's sensors detected something strange. The signal that had led them to the pod was not alone. Other signals, faint but real, pulsed across the rim. And they were all human. The survivor smiled when he saw the readings. "You thought I was alone," he said softly. "But the legends are never alone." The crew felt fear sink into their bones. When word of the discovery reached the council, panic rippled through their chambers. At first, they tried to hide it. "A hoax," they declared. "Scavenger lies. A trick for credits." But secretly, they dispatched fleets to the rim. Not to protect, but to control. To seize the survivor before the truth spread too far. The council feared what the myths might reveal. They feared what one human might awaken. On the Iron Fong, the survivor finally revealed more. "You laugh at our legends," he said, staring at the crew with eyes that made them shiver. "You think they were fairy tales. But they were warnings. Every beast, every monster, every god we wrote about, we faced them. And we buried them. But burying does not mean gone." He leaned closer, his voice sharp as a blade. "If I am here, then so are they." The crew went pale. In the darkness of space, something moved. Far away, beyond the reach of scanners, a shape drifted. Enormous. Silent. For a moment, its shadow crossed the stars. Then it was gone. The scavengers shivered. The survivor only watched. "They've awakened," he whispered. "And the galaxy will learn why our myths were feared." The galaxy had grown quiet after the rumors of the human survivor spread. The council denied it, called it a trick, a lie, nothing more than scavenger gossip. But gossip is a powerful thing. It moves faster than ships, faster than light. Soon, every trade port and backwater world carried whispers of a human walking among them again. The scavenger crew of the Iron Fang tried to keep their discovery hidden, but it was impossible. Everywhere they docked, eyes followed the survivor. He was different from them. His presence filled every space, as if the air itself bent around him. He did not shout, did not boast, did not threaten. He simply existed, and that was enough to make even hardened smugglers shift uneasily. At first, many thought him weak. His body bore scars from battles no one understood. He had awakened from centuries of sleep, and still his hands shook at times. But the way he looked at the stars, the way his eyes lingered on shadows no one else noticed, made others doubt. He carried weight in his silence. The weight of someone who had seen too much. When asked about his name, he only said, "I am what is left." The scavengers called him simply, the survivor. The crew begged him to tell them more. Who had humanity fought? Why had they left such terrifying legends behind? Were the old stories really true? At first he refused. He said little, staring at the void beyond the viewport as if searching for something far away. But one night, as the ship drifted quietly through the rim, he spoke. They were not myths, he said, his voice low. They were memories. The crew leaned closer. When your kind digs through our ruins, you laugh at our words. Dragons, gods, titans. You think they were fantasies. They were not. We named them so because our language had no other words for what we saw. What do you call a creature that eats a star? What do you call a being that walks across space like it is water? We called them gods. We called them monsters. And then, we fought them. The words silenced the room. None of the aliens spoke. The survivor's eyes burned with the fire of remembered war. We fought them, he repeated, and for a time, we held. But no battle lasts forever. No wall holds forever. One day, they came stronger. And we broke. The scavengers trembled, unsure whether to believe him. But his tone was not the tone of a liar. His words carried too much pain to be false. One of the younger crew whispered, "If these things existed, where are they now?" The survivor's gaze turned cold. Buried. Sleeping. But sleep does not last forever. If I have awakened, then so will they. The words struck like thunder. Days later, the galaxy learned he was right. It began with a mining colony on the edge of known space. The colony's last transmission was short, frantic, and filled with static. Yet one phrase was clear. It's here. The stories were true. Then silence. The council tried to cover it. They called it a reactor failure, a pirate attack, anything but what it was. But ships that went to investigate never returned. And those who listened carefully to the final recordings heard sounds that chilled them to the bone, roars that shook metal, shrieks that bent comms into static. The scavenger crew gathered in fear as the news spread. The survivor listened, his jaw tight, his fists clenched. He did not look surprised. "This is only the beginning," he said. "You thought our legends were only stories. You mocked them. But now you will see why we remembered them." He told them of the first of the great beasts, the ones his people once called the Void Serpents. They were not animals, not machines, not spirits. They were something in between, endless coils of darkness that drifted through space, feeding on energy, twisting planets into dust. His people had named them dragons because no other word made sense. The scavengers shivered. To them, dragons were tales told by drunk merchants. Yet the survivor described them with detail too sharp, too exact, for fantasy. Their scales glistened with starlight, their jaws swallowed frigates whole, their eyes burned like suns. Humanity had fought them with fire and iron, and still, barely won. "They feared us," he whispered. "That is why they slept. That is why they hid. But now, they know we are gone. And they will rise again." The crew of the Iron Fang argued into the night. Some wanted to sell the survivor to the council for credits before it was too late. Some wanted to abandon him on the nearest planet. But others, a smaller number, believed him. They had seen the shadows moving in the stars, too large to be ships. They had heard the recordings of the miners screaming before silence. The survivor said nothing during their argument. He only stared out the viewport, his face carved from stone. When at last they fell silent, he spoke again. You can run, but you will not escape. You can hide, but shadows fall everywhere. What comes cannot be stopped by denial. You have two choices, fight or die. The captain of the Iron Fang felt the weight of his words. For the first time in his life, greed and survival fought inside him. He had spent his years chasing scraps, selling secrets, running from danger. But now he realized something grim. There would be nowhere left to run. Meanwhile, far across the galaxy, the council debated in panic. They had dismissed the survivor, but now colonies were vanishing. Entire fleets sent to the rim had gone silent. Officials shouted over one another, desperate to find someone to blame. Pirates, rebels, natural disasters, anything but the truth. Only one old archivist spoke the words none wanted to hear. The human myths were not fiction. They were records. And if even one human survives, then the rest of their nightmares may survive as well. The chamber went silent. No one dared to agree, but no one dared to deny it either. In the days that followed, the galaxy trembled with unease. Traders spoke of strange shapes crossing the void. Explorers reported stars dimming as if something vast had passed in front of them. Entire moons were found hollow, drained, nothing but shells. And everywhere, the whispers spread. The legends were walking again. On the Iron Fang, the survivor stood before the crew, his presence filling the narrow space. He no longer looked weak. He stood tall, his voice strong, his gaze unyielding. You laughed at our myths, he said. Now you will live them. You will see why our enemies feared us. You will see why we endured, when no other species could. But know this, if you wait for the council to save you, you will all burn. They will hide behind lies. I am the only one who remembers how to fight them. The scavengers stared at him in silence. For the first time, they did not see a relic. They did not see a relic of a dead race. They saw a warrior, a survivor, a man who carried the weight of legends on his shoulders. And though they feared him, though they feared what he represented, a part of them felt something else too. Hope. Because if even half of what he said was true, then humanity had once fought monsters that gods themselves would fear. And if this one man carried that fire, then maybe, just maybe, the galaxy was not yet lost. But as the ship drifted into the endless dark, the survivor whispered words that froze their hearts. You think the myths are returning, he said. You are wrong. They never left. They have been waiting, watching, feeding in silence. And now they know you are weak. You laughed at our legends. But soon, you will beg to believe them. And as if the void itself had heard his words, the stars outside the viewport flickered. A shadow crossed them. Vast, coiling, endless. For a heartbeat, the crew thought they saw scales shimmer like burning glass. Then the shadow was gone. No one spoke. No one moved. The only sound was the survivor's calm, steady breath. The legends had walked again. And the galaxy would never laugh at humanity's myths again. The scream of a dying colony echoed through the void, carried on broken transmissions that no one wanted to hear. It began as static, then voices shouting in panic, then silence. But within the noise, one sentence was clear, burned into every receiver across the rim. It's here. The stories were true. After that, nothing. The colony was gone. Ships sent to investigate reported only debris, structures twisted apart, machines ripped to pieces, ground carved into patterns that looked almost alive. Then those ships vanished too, leaving only drifting fragments. The council tried to cover it. They called it an accident, a reactor breach, sabotage. Anything but the truth. But the truth had already spread. The whispers of myths returning grew louder. Traders avoided the rim. Colonists demanded protection. Soldiers asked questions their commanders refused to answer. On the Iron Fong, the crew listened to the recordings in silence. The voice of the miner still screamed in their ears. It was not the scream of someone afraid of pirates, or of war, or of fire. It was the scream of someone staring into something impossible. The survivor did not laugh. He did not look surprised. He simply sat in the corner of the mess hall, sharpening a jagged piece of scrap metal until its edge glistened like a blade. "You see now," he said at last. "The myths were not lies. They are awake." The crew shifted nervously. Some still wanted to deny it, to cling to reason, to science, to the safety of disbelief. One of them finally spoke, his voice trembling. "What was it? What could do that to a whole colony?" The survivor raised his eyes. They were steady, cold, and full of memories none of them wanted. "Dragons," he said softly. "You call them void serpents. Endless coils of hunger. My people fought them once. We thought we destroyed them. But some things do not die. They wait. They remember." The crew went pale. One whispered, "Impossible." Another muttered, "They're just stories. They're not real." The survivor's jaw tightened. "I have seen them. I have killed them. I have watched my brothers and sisters burned alive inside their jaws. You laugh at legends because you have never lived them. But now, you will." The room fell silent. No one dared to argue. Hours later, the ship drifted along the rim, its crew restless and sleepless. They argued in hushed voices, afraid to wake the man who carried their nightmares in his eyes. Some wanted to abandon him before the council found them. Others whispered that without him, they were already dead. The captain listened to them all but said nothing. He felt the weight of the survivor's words. For the first time in his life, he believed them. Not because he wanted to, but because denial was more dangerous than fear. The following day, they picked up another transmission. This time from a patrol fleet. The commander's voice was calm at first, barking orders with military precision. Then it cracked, rising into terror. "They're too big, scanners can't lock, shields collapsing, by the void, what are they?" The rest was nothing but screams and static. The crew huddled around the comms, pale and silent. The survivor stood behind them, his face unreadable. 3 minutes, he said at last. "That is how long your fleet lasted. And they were not even facing the largest of them." The words chilled the crew deeper than the silence. Later, when the ship's lights dimmed and the void pressed close, the survivor told them more. He spoke of the first tremors of humanity's war long ago, when the void serpents had awakened and swept across the stars. He described their hunger, their patience, their terrible cunning. "They do not strike all at once," he explained. "They whisper into the dark. They test your strength. They take colonies one by one, fleets one by one. By the time you understand, it is too late. That is how they feed." One of the scavengers asked, voice barely above a whisper, "And how did you fight them?" The survivor's gaze grew distant, lost in memories of fire and blood. "We became what they feared. We made weapons not of reason, but of desperation. We tore our myths from our minds and built them in steel. Dragons faced dragons. Titans fought titans. And still, it was not enough. We survived only by bleeding ourselves dry. That is why there are no more of us. Only me." The crew shivered. None wanted to hear more, but none could stop listening. His words carried the gravity of truth, a truth no one wanted but everyone felt. Meanwhile, the council grew desperate. News of vanished fleets and shattered colonies spread too quickly. They called emergency meetings, their voices sharp with fear. Some demanded the human be captured, interrogated, used for knowledge. Others wanted him destroyed, afraid that his presence alone was awakening the myths. But none could agree. And while they argued, more colonies went silent. On the Iron Fong, tension grew with every passing hour. The crew no longer laughed, no longer mocked. They stared at the survivor with wide, uncertain eyes. Some saw him as a curse. Others as their only hope. The captain finally asked the question that weighed on them all. Why you? Why are you the one who survived? The survivor looked at him, his face unreadable. Because someone had to remember. Legends mean nothing unless there is someone to carry them forward. My people chose me. I do not know if it was mercy or cruelty. The answer gave no comfort. That night, the crew dreamed of shadows. Of coiling shapes twisting around stars, of teeth the size of cities, of eyes that burned like suns. And when they woke, they found the survivor already awake, standing at the viewport, watching the stars as if waiting for something. What do you see? The captain asked quietly. The survivor's voice was soft, but carried the weight of inevitability. The first tremor. The ripple before the storm. You feel it, don't you? The silence in the void. That is not peace. That is hunger waiting. As if to prove his words, the ship's sensors flickered. For a heartbeat, something enormous crossed their scanners. Too large to be a ship, too silent to be natural. Then it was gone. The crew froze, staring at the readings in disbelief. The survivor only closed his eyes. It begins, he whispered. From that moment on, no one on the Iron Fong laughed at myths again. They knew the truth. The first tremor had come. And it was only a matter of time before the galaxy felt the full quake. The galaxy began to whisper. In the markets of core worlds, traders spoke in low voices, telling stories of ships swallowed whole by shadows. In the colonies, families refused to settle near the rim, afraid the dark itself would rise and devour them. Even the hardened mercenaries, who mocked everything, now carried charms against the old terrors. The council tried to silence it, but the void does not keep secrets. Every day another ship vanished. Every day another colony fell silent. And every day, more voices remembered the word humanity once used, dragons. On the Iron Fong, the crew lived in restless fear. They kept the lights on even in sleep, as if darkness itself would reach through the walls. Some began to speak less, afraid their words might attract something listening. The survivor watched all of it with grim patience. He said little, but every time the scanners flickered, every time the comms caught a burst of static, his eyes sharpened. One night, as the ship drifted in the void, a scavenger sat across from him, unable to hold back the question that burned inside. Why now? She whispered. Why do they return now, after all these centuries? The survivor's hand stilled on the piece of metal he was shaping into a blade. His gaze was heavy, as if it looked beyond her, into something vast. Because your galaxy forgot to fear, he said. You stopped watching the shadows. You built your towers, your fleets, your pride. You laughed at warnings. But monsters do not die when you forget them. They grow. The scavenger swallowed hard. And you knew they would come back? The survivor nodded once. Every silence is only sleep. The void is patient. But hunger always wakes. The ship's intercom crackled suddenly. The captain's voice was tight. All hands to stations. We've picked up something. They gathered on the bridge, staring at the scanners. The readings shook, distorted by interference, but shapes moved across the edge of the grid. Not ships. Not asteroids. Something else. The crew stared in dread. The shapes coiled, then stretched, then vanished as if swallowed by the black. Could be sensor error, one of them said, though his voice cracked with doubt. No, the survivor replied. His tone was quiet, absolute. They are testing us. They are close. Before anyone could respond, the comms picked up a signal. It was faint, broken, but the voice was clear enough to send ice into their veins. They're everywhere, fire useless, shields gone, gods help us. The voice ended in a scream. Silence filled the bridge. The captain gripped the console hard enough for his knuckles to pale. Where? He asked. The computer displayed coordinates deep in the rim, not far from where they drifted. Too close. The crew erupted into panic. Some shouted to turn back. Others wanted to hide. A few wanted to flee to the core and warn the council. But the survivor's voice cut through them all. You will not outrun them, he said. You will not hide from them. The void serpents choose when you die, not you. Unless. The crew turned to him. His eyes glinted, cold and hard. You learn to fight as humans fought. The words struck the crew silent. The captain asked carefully, "And how was that?" The survivor leaned forward, his voice carrying the weight of something that had burned into him across centuries. We turned fear into fire. We built weapons from myths. We made war machines the size of mountains, armor like gods, blades that burned brighter than suns. We became monsters to face monsters. That is why we lived as long as we did. The crew shivered. One muttered, "That's impossible. No one has that kind of power anymore." The survivor's gaze hardened. You do not. But I remember where one still sleeps. The words dropped like a stone in water. The captain's voice was sharp. Where? The survivor closed his eyes briefly, as though pulling the memory from deep within. In the graveyard of my people. A place your maps call the Hollow Star. My people left something there. A weapon. Maybe it still waits. Maybe not. But it is the only chance you will ever have. The crew argued, fear battling with desperation. Some said the Hollow Star was cursed, a void where ships never returned. Others whispered that if the survivor was telling the truth, this weapon might save them all. Finally, the captain spoke. Set a course. The crew froze, staring. One of them stammered. Captain, you can't be serious. That place is. Do you have another plan? The captain snapped. Do you want to drift here and wait until they decide to eat us alive? This is our only chance. The bridge fell silent. No one argued again. The ship turned toward the Hollow Star. The journey was long, and every hour carried weight. The crew jumped at shadows, whispering that they saw coils moving in the void, or heard voices in the comms. Once, a shadow blocked out a distant star, so vast it seemed endless. It moved slowly, deliberately, before fading back into the dark. The survivor did not flinch. He only murmured, "They are watching." Finally, after days of silence and fear, the ship arrived. The Hollow Star was not a star at all, but the corpse of one, an empty sphere of black glass and shattered light, as if something had ripped the heart from the sun itself. Debris floated in slow orbits, old wreckage from fleets that had never returned. The crew stared in awe and dread. What happened here? One whispered. The survivor's voice was low, almost reverent. A battle. The last stand of my people. We buried our hope in this grave. The scanners picked up something deep within the Hollow Star. A signal, faint but steady. Not natural. The survivor's lips curved in the faintest shadow of a smile. It is still there. The crew trembled as the ship descended into the dark shell of the Hollow Star. Wreckage loomed around them, hulks of ships larger than cities, torn apart as if by teeth. Silence pressed so heavy it felt alive. And then they saw it. A shape drifted in the abyss. Not a ship, not as they knew. It was vast, shaped like a blade fused with a beast, its hull black as the void, its surface carved with symbols that glowed faintly like stars. It radiated power, even in its slumber. The crew gasped. What is that? Someone whispered. The survivor's voice was steady. A weapon. A god machine. A war forged from legend. My people called it Ashborn. The crew felt their knees weaken. This was no myth. It was real. It was waiting. The survivor placed his hand against the viewport, eyes fixed on the ancient machine. Now, he whispered, the galaxy will tremble. And in the dark, something stirred. The Hollow Star was silent, but not dead. The iron fong drifted closer to the colossal machine that slept in the void. Its hull stretched for miles, black as midnight, edges sharp like a blade carved from a god's hand. Strange symbols ran along its armor, faintly glowing, pulsing like veins under skin. The crew stared, unable to breathe. It was too big, too old, too alive. The survivor stood unmoving at the viewport, eyes locked on the machine. He whispered, as though speaking to an old friend. "It still waits. After all this time." The captain found his voice. "You're telling me that thing is a ship?" "It is more than a ship," the survivor said. His tone was low, reverent. "It was born when myths became weapons. It was forged to kill the unkillable." The scavenger at his side shivered. "And you think it will still work?" The survivor's gaze hardened. "It must." They approached slowly, their ship tiny compared to the vast machine. As the iron fong drew near, the scanners crackled alive. Strange readings pulsed across the bridge. Energy deep and old, like a heartbeat. Then the hull of the Ashborn lit with faint trails of fire, running across its surface like veins awakening. The crew flinched back in terror. "It's alive," someone whispered. The survivor's voice cut through the panic. "No, not alive. But it remembers." The symbols blazed brighter. The hollow star shook with a low hum, a vibration that rattled through their bones. The Ashborn was waking. Suddenly the darkness around them moved. The scanners screamed warnings. Shapes rose out of the shadows, vast coils sliding through the void. The serpents had followed. Their scales shimmered like oil over water, their eyes burned like suns. They were larger than the iron fong, larger than battleships, their movements smooth and merciless. The crew panicked. Weapons powered up, shields flared, but fear crushed them. One serpent opened its maw, a glowing pit of fire and teeth, and the sound of its roar shook the comm system. The captain shouted orders, but the survivor raised his hand. "Wait." The crew turned on him, voices frantic. "Are you insane? They'll tear us apart." "Wait," the survivor repeated. His eyes never left the Ashborn. The serpents coiled around the hollow star, circling like predators around prey. The ship trembled under the weight of their presence. And then, light burst from the Ashborn. The ancient machine opened its eyes. Twin lines of blinding fire cut through the void, running down the length of its colossal hull. The glow spread across its surface, symbols burning brighter, casting light against the dark. The serpents recoiled at the sight, hissing, their bodies twisting in sudden agitation. The Ashborn moved. Slowly, with a groan like mountains breaking, its colossal frame shifted. It did not drift like a derelict, it rose. The survivor's voice was sharp, almost fierce. "Now, watch." The Ashborn's front split open. A weapon extended, long and sharp, a cannon the size of a city. Energy built within, brighter and brighter until the crew had to shield their eyes. One serpent lunged, faster than thought, jaws wide. The Ashborn fired. The void lit like a newborn star. A beam of fire tore through the darkness, cutting the serpent in half. Its scream echoed through every comm channel, a sound of pure rage and pain. The pieces of its body drifted, burning, until the void swallowed them. The bridge of the iron fong was silent, stunned. The survivor's lips curved in the faintest smile. "Do you see now? Myths are not lies. They are weapons." But the fight was not over. The remaining serpents shrieked in fury, their bodies thrashing through the hollow star's graveyard. They struck at the Ashborn, their coils slamming against its armor, their fangs glowing with fire. The machine staggered but did not fall. Its massive arms unfolded, each tipped with blades longer than dreadnoughts. With impossible speed for its size, it swung. One serpent's head was severed in a single blow, spinning into the void. The crew gasped. One whispered, "It fights like it's alive." The survivor's voice was grim. "It is not alive. It is human." But even the Ashborn could not end them all at once. Two serpents coiled tight around its hull, crushing with strength that bent steel like paper. The machine groaned, symbols flickering, power straining. On the iron fong, the captain turned to the survivor. "If it falls, we die too. What do we do?" The survivor's gaze was hard as stone. "We help." The crew froze. Help? Against that? We're nothing. You have weapons, the survivor cut them off. Use them. Not to kill. To distract. Humans never fought alone. We fought as swarms, as packs, as one. The captain hesitated only a second. Then he barked orders. The iron fong surged forward, weapons blazing. Beams of plasma and bursts of torpedoes slammed into one serpent's face. It turned with a roar, loosening its grip on the Ashborn. The massive machine seized its chance. Its blade arms struck upward, tearing through the serpent's body. Black ichor sprayed into the void, burning like acid fire. The Ashborn's cannon fired again, vaporizing the second serpent locked around it. The crew cheered, voices shaking with relief and disbelief. The hollow star lit with fire, serpent corpses drifting, ash and ruin filling the dark. But the victory was short. The scanners shrieked again. More shapes in the void. Dozens. No, hundreds. Serpents, coiling, slithering, converging on the hollow star. The captain's face went pale. There's too many. Even that thing can't. Yes, it can, the survivor said. His eyes glowed with something fierce, something ancient. But only if it has a voice to guide it. He turned and strode from the bridge. The captain shouted after him. Where are you going? The survivor didn't stop. To wake it fully. The crew exchanged terrified looks, then turned back to the viewport. Outside, the Ashborn floated, glowing brighter, standing tall against the oncoming swarm. It did not flee. It did not falter. It waited, like a predator eager for prey. The serpents came. The void shook with their endless coils. Their roars thundered through the comms, thousands of voices howling in fury. The Ashborn's light flared, brighter than a star. And as the survivor stepped into its heart, the galaxy remembered why humanity had once been feared. The void was not empty. It boiled with movement. The serpents came, one after another, sliding out of the black like rivers of fire. Hundreds of them, each the size of ships, their bodies coiling through the hollow star. Their eyes burned like suns, their roars echoed through every comm, and their hunger pressed against the crew's minds like claws. On the bridge of the iron fong, no one spoke. Their voices had died in their throats. They could only stare as the swarm circled, choking the hollow star in living coils. The captain whispered, "It's impossible." And yet the survivor had vanished into the Ashborn. Deep inside the ancient machine, the survivor walked halls that had not felt footsteps in thousands of years. The walls pulsed faintly with light, old symbols burning at his presence. The air tasted of dust and iron, and yet the floor trembled under a heartbeat that was not his own. The voice came, soft, almost broken. "Identify." The survivor placed his hand on the glowing surface of the wall. His eyes burned with memory. Human. The light flared. The heartbeat quickened. Human confirmed. Protocol dormant. Awaken? Yes. The survivor whispered. Awaken. The ship shuddered. The walls brightened, symbols racing alive. Dust fell from the ceiling as ancient gears turned. The Ashborn stirred like a beast roused from slumber. The survivor closed his eyes as the voice rose inside his mind. Not cold. Not empty. It was waiting for him. Outside, the swarm attacked. The first serpents lunged, fangs glowing with fire. They sank into the Ashborn's armor, tearing, but sparks of energy burst from the wounds, searing them back. The machine moved, its colossal blade arms swinging wide. One serpent's head flew into the void. Another's body split in two. The crew of the Iron Fong screamed in awe as the machine fought. But then a dozen more struck at once. Their coils wrapped around the Ashborn's frame, crushing, pulling, dragging it down into the dark. Its weapons fired, its blades tore through flesh, but still they came. Dozens more swarmed, endless, endless. On the bridge, panic rose. It can't hold. It's surrounded. The captain gripped the console with white knuckles. Where is he? What is he doing in there? Inside, the survivor's voice rose, no longer soft, but thunderous. I am here. I am your hand. I am your voice. I am human. The Ashborn roared. The void lit with fire. Energy erupted across its surface, brighter than a star, blasting the serpents away. Their bodies ignited, their screams shook the hollow star itself. The machine stood tall, armor glowing white-hot, weapons humming with fury. The voice in the survivor's mind deepened, no longer broken. Command received. Directive active. Target, hostile serpents. Status, extinction protocol. Yes, the survivor said. His eyes burned with fury, but his voice was steady. Extinction. The Ashborn moved with speed no machine should have. It struck like a beast unleashed, blade arms cutting through serpents by the dozen. Its cannon fired again and again, each blast tearing holes in the swarm, each shot leaving only ash and silence. The serpents shrieked, but they did not flee. They swarmed tighter, their bodies blotting out the stars, their coils hammering against the ancient machine. Dozens fell. Dozens more took their place. The Iron Fang fired from the edges of the battle, weapons slamming into serpents to draw them away. But the crew knew, they were nothing. All their power was sparks against the storm. The Ashborn alone held the line. The survivor felt the strain. Every strike tore through his body as though he were the machine itself. Every wound in its armor echoed in his flesh. He felt the serpent's coils crushing, their fangs piercing. And still he pushed. Still he commanded. You will not take it. You will not take them. The Ashborn answered with fury. It released weapons unseen in any age, swarms of fire that split into thousands of blades, slicing serpents apart in showers of burning ash. Its arms unfolded again, revealing cannons along its frame, each one spitting fire that burned through the endless coils. But the serpents did not stop. They struck harder, faster, sacrificing themselves to bring the Ashborn down. One drove its fangs deep into its side, burning holes into its armor. Another coiled tight around its neck, trying to rip its head from its body. The survivor staggered inside, blood running from his nose, his body trembling. The machine was too strong, too old, its power too much for anyone being. And yet he stood. And yet he pushed. Not while I breathe. The Ashborn's light flared once more. It seized the serpent, crushing its neck, and tore it free, ripping its body apart in a single motion. It turned its cannon on the serpent, latched to its side, and fired point-blank. The explosion lit the hollow star like dawn. The crew of the Iron Fang screamed in triumph, their voices breaking with disbelief. It's winning. It's killing them all. But the captain's eyes narrowed. He could see it too. For all its power, the Ashborn was faltering. Its light flickered, its movements slowed. The survivor's body was failing. The strain of wielding a god's weapon was breaking him apart. And the swarm still came. Hundreds of serpents filled the void, their roars shaking every bone in every body that heard them. They did not care for their dead. They did not care for pain. They only wanted to crush, to kill, to devour. The survivor's knees buckled. The voice of the Ashborn pressed into his skull like fire. Pilot failing. Synchronization unstable. Critical risk. I am not failing, he whispered through blood. His hand pressed harder against the console, his eyes blazing. I am human. And we do not fall until the stars themselves die. The Ashborn screamed. The void erupted with fury. Every weapon it possessed unleashed at once. Cannons, beams, firestorms, blade arms, swarms of metal shards, every part of its body became a storm of destruction. Serpents died by the dozens. Then by the hundreds. Their bodies split, their heads burned, their coils torn to ash. The hollow star lit brighter than the sun, filled with the screams of dying monsters. The Iron Fang shook under the shockwaves. The crew shielded their eyes, unable to look directly at the light. And then, silence. The void cleared. Ash drifted like snow. Fragments of serpent bodies floated, burning faintly. The swarm was gone. Only the Ashborn stood. The crew sat frozen, unable to breathe. They had just witnessed a myth made real. A single human, inside a weapon of gods, had destroyed an endless swarm that no empire had dared face. The captain whispered, almost afraid of the sound of his own voice. What is he? No one answered. Inside the Ashborn, the survivor fell to his knees. His breath came ragged, his body broken. But his eyes still burned, even as darkness closed in. The Ashborn's voice, now deep and steady, spoke inside his mind. Pilot compromised. Directive incomplete. More threats incoming. The survivor lifted his head weakly. Then we finish it. The machine hummed with power once more, standing tall, its light steady. And far beyond the hollow star, in the deep black, something stirred. Something larger. Something older. The serpents had been only the beginning. The hollow star did not rest. The swarm was gone, burned to ash, but the void still trembled. The crew of the Iron Fang clung to their seats, staring into the dark. Their eyes stung from the light of the battle, their ears rang with the echoes of serpent screams. But silence brought no peace. Something was still there. The captain's voice was little more than a whisper. Do you feel it? The crew nodded, pale and shaking. The air hummed, the void itself seemed to breathe. Something vast moved beyond sight, something so large their sensors broke trying to measure it. The crew's eyes widened as their screens filled with static. The instruments failed. The void itself was no longer theirs to read. And then they saw it. A shadow stretched across the stars. Larger than moons, larger than worlds. A serpent, but not like the others. Its body was thick as continents, its head the size of cities. Its eyes burned with endless hunger, each one a sun gone mad. It had slumbered for ages, coiled deep in the dark, waiting. The swarm had only been its children. This was their king. The crew could not move, could not think, could not breathe. The captain whispered, "It is older than history." The Iron Fang shook as the King Serpent spoke without words. Its voice was not sound. It was thought. It was everywhere at once. You dare wake the Ashborn? You dare disturb my rest? You will feed the endless hunger. The crew screamed as its mind pressed into theirs. They felt their memories pulled, their fears dragged from their skulls, their lives weighed and found meaningless. But inside the Ashborn, the survivor stood once more. Broken, bloodied, barely alive, but standing. The voice of the machine spoke, steady and strong. Primary threat identified. Enemy class, Omega. Probability of survival, 0.02%. The survivor laughed, though blood spilled from his lips. 2%. That's enough. The Ashborn's eyes lit brighter than suns. Its weapons roared once more. The battle began. The King Serpent moved with speed that defied its size. Its coils lashed through the void, smashing apart broken serpent corpses, hurling fragments like meteors. Its jaws opened, and fire like the heart of a star poured forth, engulfing the Ashborn. The Iron Fang screamed warnings. Temperature spike. Radiation overload. It can't survive that. But the Ashborn endured. Its shields flared, its armor burned, but it strode forward through the fire. Its blade arms cut through the inferno, carving a path straight for the king's throat. The two titans met in silence and fury. The serpent's coils wrapped around the Ashborn, crushing with strength to shatter worlds. Bones cracked inside the survivor's body as the pressure echoed through him. He screamed but did not break. The Ashborn answered with violence. Cannons fired point-blank into the serpent's flesh, burning holes through its scales. Blades tore free, slicing coils apart. But the serpent only tightened its grip, its roar shaking the hollow star into collapse. The crew of the Iron Fang fired every weapon they had. Their cannons slammed into the serpent's coils, their missiles burst against its skin. But their fire was sparks against a mountain. "Come on!" the captain shouted, sweat dripping down his face. "Come on, you mad human!" Inside, the survivor's vision blurred. His heart pounded, his body broke. But his voice rose louder. "You think you are hunger? You think you are endless? I am human. We were born in fire. We do not yield." The Ashborn surged. Its light erupted again, brighter than before, brighter than any sun. Its weapons screamed as one, every cannon, every blade, every shard of power. The serpent's coils burst apart in waves of burning flesh. The Ashborn slammed its blade through the serpent's chest, tearing, tearing, tearing until blood like rivers poured into the void. The serpent screamed, the sound shaking galaxies. But it did not die. It lunged, jaws wide, and bit deep into the Ashborn's side. Armor shattered. Metal screamed. The survivor fell to his knees inside, coughing blood. The Ashborn's voice pressed into his mind. "Warning. Pilot critical. Damage irreversible. Synchronization unstable." The survivor forced himself up, hand pressed to the console. His voice was hoarse, but it carried. "Then we end this together." The Ashborn's systems flared. Deep within, old weapons long locked away came alive. Its chest opened, light gathering into a single point, a star compressed into a blade of fire. The King Serpent's eyes widened. For the first time, it hesitated. The survivor whispered, "For humanity. For the galaxy. For every story they laughed at." And the Ashborn struck. The blade of fire tore through the serpent's skull, splitting it from jaw to crown. Its roar became a scream, then silence. Its body convulsed, its coils shattered, its burning blood poured into the void like a broken sea. The King Serpent died. The hollow star went quiet. The Ashborn stood in the silence, its body torn, its armor cracked, its light dimming. Slowly, it lowered its arms. Slowly, its weapons fell silent. Inside, the survivor collapsed to the floor. His breath rattled. His eyes closed. The machine spoke one last time. Pilot life signs fading. Final command. The survivor smiled faintly, his blood staining the console. His voice was soft, almost gone. "Tell them. We were never myths." The Ashborn's light pulsed once, then dimmed. The crew of the Iron Fong wept. They had seen the impossible. They had seen a human rise from legend and face the endless hunger. And win. Across the galaxy, the story spread like fire. No longer a myth. No longer a joke. The name of humanity shook the stars once more. And somewhere, in the silence of the Ashborn, a heartbeat still echoed. Waiting.